Every year, thousands of domiciliary care workers and service users become ill or are injured because of unsafe working practices or unsafe environments. This video sets out to make you more aware of the many potential hazards in the homes you may be working in, and also explains your responsibilities for health and safety. Every care worker has a legal obligation for health and safety, and may be found legally responsible for accidents or dangerous incidents that may occur. There are several laws governing health and safety in the workplace. The most relevant ones are Health and Safety at Work Act, Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations, COSH, RIDDOR, Manual Handling Operations Regulations, Fire Precautions Regulations. It shall be the duty of every employee while at work to take reasonable care for health and safety of themselves and of other persons who may be affected by their acts or omissions at work. The Health and Safety at Work Act sets out the responsibilities which are held by both employers and employees. The Act requires employers to identify hazards and associated risks in the workplace and to take sensible measures, as far as is reasonably practicable, to tackle them. The Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations specify that the employee must report hazards to their employer. The general duties of the Health and Safety Act are supported by specific regulations that relate to manual handling, protective clothing, use of equipment, hazardous substances, and the reporting of injuries and diseases. We will be looking at these areas in more detail in a moment. But remember, the legislation has been passed to protect you and those around you. You must have access to the policies and procedures that your particular agency or organisation has laid down with regard to health and safety. You must understand your rights, obligations, and responsibilities, then put them into practice. Apart from your legal responsibilities, knowing how to act and being alert and vigilant at all times can prevent injury, accidents, infections, and even death. A risk assessment of every service user's premises must be undertaken to identify all the hazards and the level of risk involved, so that action can be taken to reduce the risk or the level of risk. A copy of the risk assessment will be held at your manager's office, and you must have access to it. Any information that relates directly to hazards within a service user's home must also be included in the care plan. Perhaps a service user has poor eyesight and regularly leaves hazards where they might be a risk to you or themselves. What exactly do we mean by hazard and risk? A hazard is anything that has the potential to cause harm to you, your service user, or anyone else in the locality. Things like electrical appliances, chemicals, medicines, contaminated food, anything that could cause injury or illness or disease. Risk is simply the chance of people being harmed by the hazard and the level at which they might be harmed. The risk is then rated in the risk assessment as high, medium, or low. A risk assessment is a careful examination of a work activity or workplace, in this case, your service user's home, to identify hazards or any significant risk that could result in injury. The risk assessment is usually carried out by a supervisor, but it's possible that you may be asked to do it yourself on your first visit to a new service user. If you aren't completely confident in your abilities to do this, ask your manager for more guidance. But here's how it's done. Look for the hazards. Decide who might be harmed and how. Weigh up the risk and decide whether existing precautions are enough. If not, decide what further precautions are needed to reduce risk. Record your findings. On an ongoing basis, you should look out for any significant changes in the service user or their living environment since their original assessment. Has a service user become confused or violent, for instance? How high is the risk that they will injure themselves or another person? Any changes should be recorded in the risk assessment and the care plan updated. Occasionally, you may be asked to visit a home where no formal risk assessment has been made, perhaps because of the need to provide cover at short notice. If so, your manager must inform you. It is then important to exercise particular caution and use your own judgment, informing your manager at once if you think that the situation is dangerous or unsafe. So what are the hazards you are likely to encounter, and what can you do to reduce the level of risk?